It started as one of those weekends where everything should have gone right. 4 friends, 2 tents, and the rushing serenade of the Greenridge River as our soundtrack. We packed light, laughing at the idea of needing anything more than stories and s'mores. The first night, as the fire crackled and our laughter echoed off the trees, we heard it for the first time. A lullaby, soft, lilting, almost too faint to catch over the rustling leaves. Jenna, our resident skeptic, raised an eyebrow. Some kid's music box, she muttered, brushing it off as coincidence. The rest of us shrugged and returned to our stories, but the note stuck with me, wrapping around my mind like vines. The second night, we heard it again. This time, it was louder, clearer. The melody wove through the trees like it had a purpose. Lucas, who was always game for a scare, grinned at us and said, "Should we go check it out?" We laughed nervously, but no one moved. I remember staring into the dark woods, their shadows stretching endlessly, and feeling an icy drip of dread run down my spine. The music faded out slowly, as if teasing us. On the third night, the song started before sunset. It drifted in with the evening wind, unnervingly sweet and persistent. I saw Jenna's jaw tighten as she tried to keep her calm facade. Lucas, who'd been playing tough the previous nights, had gone quiet, staring into the distance with wide, unblinking eyes. We turned in early, sleep coming reluctantly as the notes hovered on the edge of consciousness. At some point, I awoke to a chill that swept over the campsite. The lullaby was louder than ever, echoing through the trees like a phantom choir. I rolled over and found Jenna's sleeping bag empty. My pulse surged. She wasn't the type to wander off alone. "Jenna?" I whispered, but my voice was swallowed by the tune. I shook Lucas awake, and soon we were stumbling through the dark, calling her name. When we reached the riverbank, the moon's glow caught on something small and black. Her phone. It lay on the rocks, lit up and playing that haunting song. The same song. My hands shook as I picked it up, the screen cold to the touch, like it had been lying there for hours. The music cut out abruptly when Lucas's flashlight swept past the trees. For a second, I thought I saw movement, a flicker of white fabric vanishing into the woods. We called for Jenna until our voices cracked. We retraced our steps a dozen times, searching the woods, the water's edge, every possible path. Dawn came, staining the sky with an indifferent red, and we knew we were alone. The authorities found no trace of her, only a set of footprints that led to the water and stopped. They called it a drowning, but we knew better. Jenna didn't fall. She was taken by whatever hummed that song through the trees. Weeks have passed, but the sound haunts me still. Every so often, when the night is silent, I hear the lullaby drift through my cracked window, tempting me back to the river with its mournful, wordless promise. And every time, I know somewhere out there, Jenna is listening too. I was out on my first solo camping trip. The woods had always called to me, the way the trees whispered in the wind and the stars painted stories in the sky. I'd set up camp deep in the forest, far from the buzzing of civilization. The fire was my only companion, its crackling the only sound other than the occasional hoot of an owl. The warmth lulled me into a strange sense of security. Sometime after midnight, I was jolted awake by an eerie stillness. It wasn't just quiet. It felt as if even the trees were holding their breath. The fire was low, embers glowing like dying stars, casting flickering shadows across the clearing. I stretched my arms, yawned, and that's when I saw them. Pale, glowing eyes. Dozens of them. They were clustered just beyond the perimeter of my camp, suspended in the dark like a constellation of cold stares. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. Maybe exhaustion playing tricks on me. But the longer I looked, the clearer they became. Eyes that didn't blink, didn't move, just stared. A shiver crawled down my spine. I whispered into the dark, "Who's there?" My voice cracked, sounding small and foolish against the silence. No response. The eyes remained, each set hovering, fixed on me like tiny moons in the void. The fire sputtered, and for a heartbeat, I thought I saw the hint of sharp teeth glinting under the moon's dim light. My mind raced. I knew no animal I'd ever read about behaved like this. Wolves would move, coyotes would howl, but these eyes were unnaturally patient. Every time the fire hissed, I expected them to charge, but they didn't. They simply stayed there, a ring of luminous watchers, frozen in that liminal space between presence and attack. I reached for my flashlight with trembling hands, flicked it on, and shined it toward the closest pair. Nothing. They blinked out like someone had snuffed a candle, only to reappear a foot to the left. My heart thudded against my chest so hard it hurt. I knew I couldn't let the fire die. I threw on the last of my wood supply, sparks leaping up like a swarm of fireflies. The eyes didn't flinch, not one bit. Hours dragged on like years. My legs cramped, and my mouth went dry as the fire waned to embers again. The first hints of dawn painted the sky in fragile strokes of pink and gold. The second the sun's light hit the clearing, the eyes vanished. Not in a blink, not in a scurry, just gone, like they had never been there at all. Relief surged through me until I looked down. The perimeter of my camp was scarred with deep claw marks gouged into the dirt, circling the site like a terrible halo. The smell of something coppery and raw clung to the air. It wasn't my imagination. I packed up and left within 10 minutes, my hands shaking as I stuffed my gear into my backpack. Now, as I sit in the safety of my apartment, the claw marks still etched in my mind, I wonder, what were they waiting for? And why did they choose to spare me? If anyone plans to camp in Hollow Creek, be warned. Something is out there, watching, waiting. We found the journal half buried near the fire pit of an abandoned campsite, its cracked leather cover stained with damp soil, and the telltale green of creeping moss. I remember how Sam plucked it out of the earth, grinning as if he'd unearthed some long-forgotten treasure. The air was cool and still, with that uneasy silence that pressed too hard on the ears. The sun had just begun to dip below the horizon, casting long, skeletal shadows across the clearing. "Guys, you gotta hear this," Sam called out, flipping through the brittle, yellowing pages. I stepped closer, the others gathering around, the fire crackling in a weak attempt to ward off the encroaching night. The writing was jagged, scrawled with a hand that grew more erratic with each page. Each entry detailed mundane camping activities, hiking, fishing, sitting around the fire. But toward the end, the tone shifted. The words became frantic, ink smudged, as if the writer's hand had trembled. The second to last page sent a shiver down my spine. I've seen it watching. I know now that I'm not alone. The forest is too silent, too aware. Sam turned the page, and I swear, a cold gust swept over us like an invisible hand. The final line, stark and centered, read, "If you're reading this, leave now, it's coming." We laughed nervously, but the humor didn't reach our eyes. Sam closed the journal with a shrug, tossing it aside like it was just another campfire story. Night pressed down on us, thick and suffocating, and the wind stilled. No rustle of leaves, no chirping crickets, just a yawning silence that coiled around our campsite. Hours passed, the fire now little more than glowing embers. I lay in the tent, eyes wide open and ears straining. At first, I convinced myself it was the wind, or maybe an animal, but then I heard them. Footsteps. They were soft, deliberate, crunching over fallen twigs and dry leaves. My breath caught in my chest. The steps stopped just outside the thin fabric of the tent, and I could see the silhouette of feet in the faint moonlight. Sam stirred beside me, his brow furrowing as if he could feel the cold sweat clinging to my skin. I motioned for silence, pointing to the shadow outside. It shifted, slowly dragging what sounded like metal across the ground. The grating noise sent a sharp jolt of terror through my veins. The shape leaned closer, pressing against the tent fabric, stretching it until I could make out the sharp curve of its jaw, the hollow sockets of its eyes. I shut my eyes tight, praying it would go away, willing the world to right itself. The noise stopped. A moment passed, then two. I opened my eyes. The shadow was gone, leaving behind a deep, dark quiet that swallowed my frantic heartbeat. Morning came like a sudden reprieve. The clearing was washed in pale sunlight, dew glistening like diamonds on the grass. The journal lay open, flipped to a new page. My heart froze as I read the fresh, inked words. You were warned. We packed in silence, and I haven't been back since. I don't plan to. If you find that campsite, if you see that journal, take my advice. Leave. It's still out there. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and check out my other content on the screen now.